Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing on the Eastern Front in the winter of 1942. The temperature has plunged to 40 degrees below zero. Your breath crystallizes before it leaves your lips. Around you, the landscape stretches endlessly white and merciless. But the cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's a weapon. Frostbite claimed more casualties than bullets in some winter campaigns, turning healthy soldiers into amputees within hours. When we think of World War II's deadliest threats, we imagine panzer divisions, U-boats prowling the Atlantic, or bombers darkening European skies. Yet for millions of soldiers fighting across the frozen wastes of Russia, the Ardennes forest, and the Norwegian fjords, the most relentless adversary wore no uniform and fired no shots. Frostbite attacked without warning, creeping through inadequate boots and gloves to destroy tissue at the cellular level. Medical records from the Eastern Front reveal that some German divisions lost up to 15% of their combat strength to cold injuries before ever engaging the enemy. Soviet forces suffered similarly catastrophic losses. American troops during the Battle of the Bulge discovered that their standard-issue leather boots provided virtually no protection when temperatures dropped and the winter rains turned to ice. The human cost was staggering and permanent. Soldiers who survived frostbite often faced amputation of fingers, toes, or entire limbs. Even those who kept their extremities lived with chronic pain, reduced circulation, and heightened sensitivity to cold for the rest of their lives. Military commanders recognized that they were fighting a two-front war, one against the enemy and another against the elements themselves. Standard uniforms, no matter how many layers soldiers added, couldn't solve the fundamental problem. Fabric could insulate, but it couldn't create an impermeable seal against moisture and wind-driven cold. The military-industrial complex of multiple nations began a desperate race to develop something revolutionary. Not just better clothing, but a chemical barrier that could be applied directly to the skin itself. Buried in the declassified archives of military research facilities lies a trail of cryptic references to experimental protective compounds. British War Office documents from 1943 mention field trials of cutaneous cold weather preparations distributed to troops in northern Norway. American military medical journals contain scattered reports of barrier ointments tested on soldiers training in Alaska and the Rocky Mountains. Interviews with surviving veterans occasionally surface intriguing mentions of a thick, waxy substance issued alongside standard cold weather gear, something their officers called winter skin or simply the paste. Yet unlike penicillin or radar, this innovation never made headlines. It never received its moment of recognition. Instead, it faded into obscurity as the war ended and military priorities shifted toward nuclear threats and jet propulsion. The challenge in reconstructing this lost technology lies in the fragmentary nature of the evidence. Unlike major weapons programs that generated mountains of documentation, these skin barrier experiments were often conducted at the battalion level by forward-thinking medical officers working with limited resources. Some veterans recall the substance having an almost petroleum-like consistency, while others remember something closer to lanolin, the natural grease extracted from sheep's wool. A few scattered chemical analyses from British military laboratories hint at formulations containing whale oil, beeswax, and refined petroleum distillates. What's clear is that multiple research teams working independently across different allied nations arrived at similar conclusions. The key to preventing frostbite wasn't just insulation, but creating a moisture-proof, flexible barrier that could withstand extreme temperature fluctuations while allowing the skin to breathe. Piecing together the probable composition of these barrier compounds, well, it really requires combining historical chemistry with practical field requirements. Whale oil, you see, emerges repeatedly in the documentation, and for good reason. Unlike most fats and oils, whale oil remains liquid even in sub-zero temperatures, providing a mobile protective layer that wouldn't crack or flake off with movement. Soldiers operating in Arctic conditions had known for generations that whale oil rubbed into leather boots kept them supple and water-resistant. The innovation came when military researchers realized this same principle could be applied directly to human skin, particularly the extremities most vulnerable to frostbite. The most sophisticated formulations apparently went beyond simple whale oil. Chemical analyses suggest the addition of lanolin as an emulsifying agent, allowing the oil-based barrier to adhere more effectively to skin without immediately being absorbed. Beeswax provided structure and increased water repellency, creating a semi-solid consistency that could be stored in small tins and applied like a thick ointment. Some experimental versions incorporated early silicone compounds, though the technology was still in its infancy. The application process was straightforward but meticulous. Soldiers were instructed to warm the tin against their body heat until the contents softened, then massage a generous layer into their feet, hands and face before exposure to extreme cold. The barrier would create a temporary artificial skin that repelled moisture while allowing sweat vapor to escape, preventing the deadly combination of wetness and freezing temperatures that caused most frostbite cases. The genius of this approach lay in its simplicity and compatibility with existing protocols. The barrier compound worked alongside, not instead of, proper layering and regular sock changes. Veterans who used these preparations reported that their feet stayed noticeably drier during long marches through snow, and that the waxy coating seemed to trap a thin layer of warm air against their skin. Some medical officers theorized that the barrier also reduced heat loss through radiation and convection, though the science of that era couldn't fully explain the mechanisms involved. What mattered was that soldiers who used these preparations experienced measurably lower rates of cold weather injuries compared to control groups using standard equipment alone. The forgotten wisdom of World War II's anti-frostbite barriers resonates powerfully with today's challenges. Modern mountaineers tackling Everest and K2, polar explorers crossing Antarctica, and even athletes competing in winter sports all face the same fundamental problem that confronted soldiers 80 years ago: how to protect exposed skin from moisture, wind, and extreme cold simultaneously. Contemporary outdoor equipment companies have developed sophisticated synthetic barriers, but many still rely on principles identical to those discovered during the war. High-performance barrier creams used by expedition climbers typically contain petrolatum, silicone polymers, and natural waxes, essentially refined versions of the winter skin compounds issued to soldiers. What's particularly intriguing is how much of this wartime knowledge was temporarily lost and had to be rediscovered. The specialized formulations used during World War II weren't commercially available in the post-war era, and the institutional knowledge held by military medical corps gradually dispersed as veterans aged and research priorities shifted. It wasn't until the 1980s, when recreational extreme cold activities became popular, that scientists and outdoor enthusiasts began independently developing similar barrier technologies. Had the World War II research been properly preserved and built upon, we might have advanced cold weather protection technology decades earlier. This raises a compelling question. How many other tactical innovations from that era remain buried in archives, waiting to solve contemporary problems? The intersection of necessity, limited resources, and brilliant improvisation that characterized World War II research produced solutions that remain relevant precisely because they addressed fundamental physiological challenges that haven't changed. The story of World War II's anti-frostbite barriers is ultimately a testament to human adaptability under extreme duress. When soldiers faced an enemy that standard equipment couldn't defeat, military researchers turned to unconventional solutions drawn from whaling traditions, industrial chemistry, and practical field observation. They understood that protecting their troops required thinking beyond conventional armor and weapons to address the basic physiological vulnerabilities that extreme environments exposed. This holistic approach to combat effectiveness recognizing that a soldier disabled by frostbite is just as lost as one struck by enemy fire, represents tactical thinking at its most sophisticated. As we face our own era's environmental challenges, from climate change to the renewed interest in polar exploration and even potential Mars colonization, these wartime lessons take on fresh urgency. The principles that guided World War II researchers remain valid: understand the mechanism of injury, create barriers that work with rather than against the body's natural processes, and design solutions simple enough to implement under field conditions. The lost technology of winter skin reminds us that innovation doesn't always require cutting-edge materials or complex engineering. Sometimes the most effective solutions combine traditional knowledge with scientific understanding and practical necessity. If this journey into forgotten tactical history has captured your imagination, then the Lost Tactician needs you in our ranks. Subscribe to uncover more buried innovations that shaped warfare and survival. Share this video with anyone fascinated by the ingenuity humans display when pushed to their limits. And tell us in the comments, what other lost secrets from military history should we investigate next? The archives are deep, the stories are waiting, and every discovery connects us to the resourceful souls who came before us. Until next time, stay tactical, stay curious, and remember, the past has more to teach us than we've yet learned to ask.